Councilmember Brandman, do you have any you would like to speak?
Well, I don't know. I guess that was a holder on. Maybe I pressed it incorrectly. But since you did call on me, I will give the notice that I did have contact with the advocate for the developer, and one verbal contact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Brandman. Councilmember Valencia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments and thoughts. Although this project may not be in my own neighborhood, I have friends, former teachers, family members that live in the immediate neighborhood. Many residents from that neighborhood have actually reached out and expressed their concerns with the project, some of which I deeply share. I don't believe it's in the best interest of our community to have an establishment that sells liquor 400 yards away from an elementary school and within 1,000 yards of a high school. I do understand that liquor is sold on the property by current businesses. However, the existence of current liquor licenses does not mean we have to approve and replace them with another. In 2019, our city, through the Housing Authority, acquired a piece of property on the corner of Lincoln and Beach in West Anaheim that was formerly occupied by a car wash and a gas station. In order to, the property was purchased, and I quote the city staff report, create a viable development property that would make an impact in revitalizing the intersection. Colleagues, we should be mindful about the fact that we are now considering a gas station and a car wash in central Anaheim, where we are in the process of redeveloping a property that was previously occupied by similar businesses in West Anaheim. Lastly, I don't believe that this project would adequately prevent potentially detrimental impacts on adjacent properties, which are residents' homes and backyards. The design of the car wash has 2 waiting lanes, as you can see on the site plan, which would allow for 2 lanes of vehicles to idle day in and day out while residents may be gardening, barbecuing, or playing with their children in their backyards. Oftentimes, a mortgage is the largest purchase and investment of people's lifetimes. When the residents of the adjacent neighborhood purchased their homes, I doubt they expected that 2 lanes of idling vehicles would be built in their backyards. I would not be okay with 2 lanes of idling vehicles adjacent to my own home. And because of these reasons, I don't feel comfortable supporting the design of a project that would impact residents in the ways that I've identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Valencia. Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you, Mayor. I came from a country where the government officials determined what, how, and what going to be built and what going to be next. And it's a disaster. Where I came from is a disaster. Another country that does that is Venezuela, and North Korea, and Zimbabwe. It's a disaster there. What do I know about what the economy needs? How many Starbucks coffee do we need? How many McDonald's do we need? How many Amazon trucks do we need? And the answer is simple. In a free market economy, the market determines how many Amazon trucks are going to be there. It's not to me to determine how many car wash are needed there. It's the market who determines that. It's not me. Traffic study, and I hear many comments questioning the traffic study, but we're talking about a center that is between Sunkist and the 57 freeway. A lot of traffic there already. Another one of my points is this shopping center was already for sale. Doesn't matter what the new owner would bring, let's say Starbucks coffee or a McDonald's, the current businesses would have been displaced. Doesn't matter what we build here, the current businesses owners going to be displaced. It's reality of life. It's a hard decision here, but I believe in the free market, and the free market determines what's next. It's not to me, it's not to the government to determine what it is. And those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Moreno.
I appreciate that perspective, Councilmember Diaz. Thank you for articulating that. I often feel the same way. In fact, this is a property owner who spent who's themselves an immigrant family who pulled their resources together and have developed themselves to become quite successful, purchased a property, and so should a property owner be allowed to do whatever they would like on that property. And is a government's role, I think, in the extreme, as you mentioned, when government does that, it begins to impose its will absent a market. But I do also worry when a market imposes its will on people. And the role of government, I would hope for me, is to do no harm. And the role of government is to represent its people. That is the distinction, I think, between the slippery slope I think you're so articulately guiding us on is let's not become that. For me, what I'm listening to this evening is what are the people who will be most directly impacted? What do they say? As was said by many of the commenters, would you want this to be your backyard? And I think that's a mode from which I try to operate as much as I can is if I don't feel comfortable with it in my neighborhood, why would I ask another neighborhood to put up with that? Regardless of how I feel about markets and business and small businesses. I also do think that a government action tonight would displace 8 other small businesses that have spent 3 decades investing of themselves, raising their families in that specific location. And so I take their perspectives and what's going to happen to them. Whatever jobs are created through this development, we actually end up losing because we displaced a bunch of other small businesses and displacing 8 owners of small businesses who invested their families' lives. I appreciated that the developer reached out to the community. I said that was really important to me when we first met. And I actually do have some questions for the applicant, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please.
Sure. So, sure, the developments for me often, I end up having conflicts of conscience in many ways. I think some of the commenters talked about in Anaheim Hills, there was a proposal for affordable housing. We desperately need housing, period, in the city, let alone affordable housing. But it was displacing a community space that the neighborhood really, really valued. The developer said it's not a value. It's not bringing much interest to the market, and we need something different. And the neighborhoods came out and said, no, it is a space we value and that we shop, and we just would ask the developer to invest in that and build it back up rather than displace all of us. And the council, I think, in its wisdom said, we're going to side with our neighbors on this one and ask the developer to help develop the commercial developments. So in that spirit, I'm going to ask some of the questions I've asked you, but I want to reconcile what we've heard from some of the small business owners that you've shared with me over a year ago that you're working diligently with them and what you've shared in testimony to the Planning Commission. In the write-up, it looks like you're doing really good work, and you shared with me in conversation with the small business owners that they didn't necessarily want to move, but they appreciated this effort and that they were already almost willing and able to do so through financial support. My understanding was that you were going to provide that financial support, but what I'm hearing this evening is that it's the city who has to use its economic development funds, the state or the federal funds. So really the people, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay for the cost of the displacement and not yourself. Can you help me reconcile that? Because I thought it was you that was going to invest in helping them relocate, not necessarily ask the state to use its state monies to help relocate because of a private development.
Thank you so much for your question, because this is a very sensitive topic. As you know, I've spent a lot of time already talking to each tenant, really getting to know them. And in the spirit of full transparency, I actually went to the tenants on a Monday and I showed them our closing escrow statement and I showed them our promissory note. We have a seller financing arrangement, so our mortgage is to the previous owner. And I showed them all this, and I showed them our rent roll and what they pay. And there's no way that this rent roll can support this development. It just can't. And when someone buys a development like this, where there are month-to-month tenants, they are buying it in order to make a profit, but there can't be any profit earned with the current tenants. And that's why I explained to them that in as much as I would, love to help them and love them to staying in this center, it's just not an option. This is going to change. And that doesn't have to do with the vote here tonight. If it's not this development, it's going to be another one. It just can't support these tenants. So being that as it is, we've offered substantial help to each tenant. I've spoken to all of them, and I have offered to connect them with the government agencies that I have mentioned before.
So sure, that's the essence of the question. It's not so much, it sounds like what you're doing, what you did, which is not what my understanding was what you were going to do, is that you're giving them brochures, pamphlets, phone numbers of public city agencies to help them relocate with public dollars. Where my understanding was that you were going to invest in that to help them relocate at whatever cost. I actually even heard you say that myself at the community meeting at Sunkist, that at whatever cost it would take, you would help these folks move to relocate, because you know how hard it is to relocate businesses, especially restaurants. So my question is are you now asking the city in the displacement of these small businesses to take ownership of then helping them relocate and fund it through our grants, and not you?
So I don't know if you heard during my opening remarks, when we purchased the center, we didn't raise the tenants' rent to market rates. They are all substantially below market rates. And that's actually part of the problem why they can't find something else within Anaheim, because they're not paying market rates. So we did not raise them to market rates. We did not charge them CAM, which is standard in all commercial real estate. It's not something that I'm making up. This is something in all commercial real estate. We gave them a lot of extensions on rental payment. There was one tenant who didn't pay rent for 5 months, who is still actually delinquent. There are other tenants who are also delinquent. Just this past month, I only received rent from one tenant. If you add up all that help, and I've actually added it up, we have subsidized them to the tune of $350,000. So what you're asking me to do is help them even above that. And I ask, is that the precedent that's being asked for developers in Anaheim?
Yeah.
To now help month-to-month tenants to pay for relocation and to pay for all that? I think I've done more than any other developer that I know. So
Shira, one, you couldn't remove them during COVID because there was an emergency order that says you cannot collect rents if they don't have it. I think though your intention still would have been not to, but nonetheless, you wouldn't have been able to. But I appreciate all the resources put in these indirect ways that you're mentioning, which is great. What I heard you say in a community meeting was that you would help them relocate at whatever cost. That's what I heard. It wasn't, we'll help sustain you until we decide what happens in the city. It wasn't that. It was, we will help you relocate at any cost. And you also repeated that to me in our virtual meeting once COVID hit. So that's I think the conflict that I'm having here. The business owners seem to have a different tone to those conversations than what your testimony to date suggests, right? It almost sounds like they were ready to go, willing to meet the destiny that was before them, is the way you've kind of articulated it, at least on the record, as it's been reported to us here. But the business owners came this evening and said that's something different. And so that worries me, and I hope that worries all of us. I'm not saying you're being dishonest. I'm not saying they're being dishonest. I'm just saying there's a disconnect here, and I'm wondering if you might help me reconcile that. Their tone is very different from your tone, as you've stated so far.
Absolutely. And as I've said, I met with them, and in the spirit of full transparency, I've shown them all of our sensitive documents, and I've told them I've shown them the need to develop and the need to have different tenants at this location. I've actually even asked them, can you pay more rent so that you can stay in this location? Can you pay something that can help us carry this on? And they can't. One can, but one can't in the tune that would lift us up and can carry it on. So yes, I think they are all aware of the finality of their circumstance. But of course I understand that they don't want it. Of course. It's human nature not to want it.
So, Sherry, we did hear some testimony this evening that in the summer you had sat with some folks and shared with them that you want to make sure that they're comfortable, or at least that they're engaged with whatever you propose. It almost as if you weren't sure yet what you wanted to develop, but you wanted it to be something good for the neighborhood and, of course, for your business, something you shared with me as well. When we spoke after the Sunkist Library meeting, I asked you, is there no way that the Jaeger House, which, by the way, which hasn't been noted this evening, is also a tremendous community resource. A lot of community groups actually meet at the Jaeger House at no cost. And for those of us who work in community groups, you know how hard it is to find meeting space in our city that doesn't charge you. So it's a tremendous community resource as well as neighborhood resource. At that time, I had asked you, is there any way that the restaurant, is it just not viable? Is a restaurant on that site just not viable? And you said, no, your market analysis says it's not. What I heard you tonight say, though, was that you reached out to McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, perhaps other eateries, certainly Trader Joe's, and they said no.
Right.
What I learned from Sandy throughout the year, because I didn't hear back from you since over a year ago, since you hired Jeff Flint, is what I heard from Sandy is that she had submitted a proposal to you, Sandy, the owner of Jaeger House, for a beer garden. That would be an outdoor garden, which we know is very popular in Anaheim. People love that about how we become Brew City, and had paid for the architect to design that. Shared with you that she would love to invest in that. The other business owner said something similar on the aesthetic. What happened to that idea? Is that something that's just not viable, a beer garden in the area? Or the other shops once the development is invested in, which is what we talked about in Serrano Hills, if the owner invested in the commercial property aesthetically, that would really shift the market. Is that something that you considered, or was it not even proposed?
I'm sorry. So let me just clarify your question. So you're saying that Sandy had an idea for a beer garden at our location, is that correct?
Yes.
I don't remember this conversation.
She had a drawn-out architect. In fact, she even shared it with Visit Anaheim with Jay Burris, and what she shared with me was that he was very excited about that because of all the developments happening on the 57 with the Honda Center. And with the Phoenix Club leaving, it's going to be the only German restaurant in Anaheim as you enter the gateway of what would be OC Vibe, downtown OC Vibe. And so she had actually renderings drawn up, and my understanding is she had presented them to you for your consideration.
I don't think so. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. I have never seen such drawings.
Okay. It seemed pretty exciting. And then
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah. And so maybe it's something to still consider, I think. I think you would find it quite exciting, given the nature of the developments on the other side of the freeway and the kind of customers that would come in, as we've already heard this evening. Last question for now for me, Shira, is, so only because this has been brought up by several commenters, is that you did hire a lobbyist. And since over a year ago, I guess you did it in January, I haven't heard from you, so I didn't know that was the case. And one thing that was disheartening to me is because I was hopeful with the tone that I was hearing you talk about in relation to the business owners and themselves too, of how they wanted to figure something out at that time, that I got a call saying, well, we're no longer really talking because she now hired this really high-priced lobbyist named Jeff Flint, who has a lot of strong relationships with the council members, and there's really no need to deal with us anymore. And in fact, what they mentioned, they were hosted, I guess, for one meeting at the Chamber of Commerce. It was some kind of PowerPoint. They were given a brochure, and that was it. It wasn't anything of real substance in their perspective. So can you kind of share with us, just to clarify the record, why was there a need to hire a lobbyist? Because I appreciated your personal investment in meeting with the community directly, meeting with me, but then you hired a high-priced lobbyist. And can you clarify why was there a need to do that? What was to be gained by that? And the thinking behind that?
Sure. So thank you for asking. As you know, we started this process, meeting with the community, meeting with the people, door knocking, and we really ended this process, meeting with the community, door knocking, meeting with the tenants. So all throughout the process, even though we had our political consultant help us, we still connected with the people, connected with the tenants. That never changed. The only reason why we decided to hire that political consultant was because we had a hard time understanding Anaheim politics, and he is able to explain to us, the relationships and things that we need to do to help us. For instance, he was the one who gave us the idea to host a virtual town hall meeting. That wasn't something that we had done, and he'd given us that idea during COVID, which we appreciated. So things like that we had done
Sure,
along the
I'm sorry, I have to
process.
interrupt because I actually told you to do that as well, and I didn't charge you any money for that. We had our first meeting under COVID, our second meeting, I should say, where you showed a lot of really some of the renderings, and I appreciate you noted that in your testimony that the feedback I gave, and part of that was it's going to be really important to me to hear the community on this. So to the extent you could keep meeting with them, even if it's virtual, would be really important.
Right.
So it's befuddling why you would say that it took a political consultant to be paid to give you an idea that you had just received from an actual council member.
Well, there were a variety of reasons, and we were very proud of all the time spent, obviously, with tenants, with the community, and that definitely went on throughout. Being that we are a small family business, and being that we don't have endless capital, we just felt that we needed assurance that all this money that we're spending now on this project, that it goes somewhere. As I'm sure you can relate, when you have so much money invested somewhere, you want to hang on to anything that will help you get to the finish line. And so if someone who understands Anaheim can help us along the process, yes, of course we're willing to bring him on. We're willing to explore all options. As you know, we've really done everything that every source of outreach that was presented to us, we've done it.
And sure, thank you for that honest response. Where did you get the advice of who to contract that knows the politics of Anaheim? Normally what we hear from consultants is for the technical reports of traffic studies or engineering studies or other market studies. You said you hired a consultant for the politics of Anaheim to understand them. Where did you get the advice who did you get the card from that said this is the person that you should hire?
If you're asking how did we're associated with the consultant, I can't remember exactly. It was building communication, like relationships, just building different relationships that led us one to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's where we found ourselves. But I don't understand why that's a pertinent question, honestly.
Oh, it's quite pertinent because the community brought it up as a concern. So I want to make sure that you can clarify for the record. Because the perception created in the comments this evening was people of Anaheim, there's no point to this because once you hire this high-priced lobbyist, they get whatever they want. And so that's why I want to make sure you can clarify the record that was not necessarily the intent here. If it was, it kind of sounds like you needed guidance on the politics of Anaheim, which means the politics of a council. So that's why it's pertinent, because the community can bring it up, and I want to make sure you can clarify the record for yourself. So thank you. Mr. Mayor, that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you, Shira.
Thank you, Councilmember. You can sit down, please. Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you. Sherry, you don't need to justify why you hired someone to help you through the process. This is a complex issue. We all get it. If I was putting forth a project like this, I would need someone like that to help too. Don't feel badly. You're simply being, at this point, the target of politically motivated attacks, and I apologize for that. I do understand the concerns of the neighbors, though, but this is a commercial property, and neighbors have always known it. And we're not talking about converting commercial to residential like we were in the Serrano Center, which was in my district. This project retains its always intended commercial use. Yes, this project displaces existing businesses, but as we've heard, they've They've been on month-to-month leases for years with no guarantee of being able to stay. It's frankly not the council's role to interfere in the landlord-tenant process in the same way that it's not our role to interfere in the collective bargaining process in the private sector. And it's not a property owner's responsibility, particularly for tenants on a month-to-month lease, to provide any kind of relocation assistance. This applicant, they're not asking for a zone change. We're still talking about a commercial use that's allowed, albeit subject to a CUP. They only need ministerial deviations from the code to make it work, and our traffic and our noise studies show that the neighborhood won't be impacted to the point that our code wouldn't otherwise allow. For me, it's not enough to just hear, we don't want it, the community doesn't need it in order to deny a project. I really need evidence that it's truly not a compatible use, or that its approval is contingent upon a litany of other variances, as we've seen with some other projects that have come before us. But this project, that is not the case with this project. I don't believe that the appellant has shown sufficient reason to deny the project, and Mr. Mayor, if you'll entertain a motion, I'll move to deny the appeal.
There's a motion to deny the appeal. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Second by Councilmember Diaz at this time. So there's a motion and a second. Next one is Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Faessel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, everybody knows I'm a pack rat. So in order to get some background on this, watch out what you wish for. I had staff dig around and find me all the information on the Sunkist Ball Road intersection rebuild that goes back to 2011, about 1,200 pages. And I certainly didn't read all 1,200 pages, but I scanned the good parts. And the good parts dealt with the traffic and the noise studies. And then I dug out our staff report and I compared the noise and the traffic studies of, 7 or 8 years ago and the more recent ones. And surprisingly, they were consistent. So I'm not going to talk so much about traffic and noise, although one traffic issue I do have a concern of. Our Public Works Director and the one that preceded him both gave testimony in this thing that the southbound Sunkist backup to turn east or onto the 57 was a major issue that prompted or one of the concerns that prompted the rehabilitation of the intersection. And I'm not sure if it was our current Public Works Director or his predecessor, said that the traffic often backs up 2,000 feet, which would bring that almost to Wagner. And believe me, my wife Susan and I have been in that, and the testimony also says it takes up to 6 or 7 rotations to clear the lanes. Yet today, it is still a very, very complex and busy intersection. And I'm a little concerned, as has been talked about this evening, about the residents from Hilda Street in the AM and PM hours having to get out onto Sunkist with a backup. And I'm just going to assume that this project isn't going to make it any easier with another 1,507 trips. I appreciated Joe Schenk's comments. I know Joe pretty well over the last few years. Spoken by a true public works engineer. And Joe, I appreciate your thoughts on that. We were given in this staff report for today's action 1,018 pages of resident and constituent comments. And not all of them were from Anaheim. And there weren't 1,018 emails or comments, because some of the comments and some of the material went on for several pages. But there were certainly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments submitted, and not all of them, surprisingly, were just replications of each other, which is often what we get. You just fill in the blank and push send, and that wasn't what these were, interestingly. And again, they were sent to the staff on behalf of the residents for the Planning Commission meetings. I'm going through my notes, and these are just my personal notes, and the emails that I have from residents go back to October 24th, 2019. So that even predated the December 4th, 2019 meeting at the Sunkist Library, of which I also attended. My wife attended, and we had, I think my staff attended as well. I've also listened in or attended all the other subsequent meetings that we've had on this. I think I've responded to just about every resident that contacted me. I've lost track of the number of times that the planning director and I have chatted about this. Probably, and Dave C. as well, who's no longer with the city, he and I chatted about this almost endlessly. Mr. White was bringing up earlier today a term that he called broad discretion. And I'm going to exercise some of that broad discretion, and I just don't think this project is compatible with the neighborhood. And I'm concerned, just wait a minute, I'm concerned, as was mentioned by some of our public comments, about idling cars immediately adjacent to, what might be my backyard wall. Incidentally, anybody that knows where I don't live on Hilda Street, but I live around the corner. Susan and I drive this probably intersection regularly. In fact, I see Sandra out there in the audience, and she knows that I drive her completely crazy by calling in Anaheim any times on the property currently owned by Shira. Graffiti, trash, again, we heard about the fires. We received notes on those. Homeless issues. My hope is that she can become a better neighbor. I'm still receiving comments from the public that are against this project. I simply can't support it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, council colleagues. I think is there any more comments from my council colleagues at this time? If there is none, there is a motion and a second on this project, and I'd like to have the last word, and want to make sure that we have all spoken. This property, the Ball Road of the 57 freeway, is zoned for commercial use. You all know that. It's been there for ages. As we heard, the proposed development of a gas station and car wash is consistent with the zoning and in line with the market development factors. It appears the developer has made extensive modification to the plan to accommodate issues raised by the neighborhood and our planning staff, including reorienting the site and adding features like higher sound wall to further mitigate any potential noise issues. As a small business owner myself for almost 35 years, my heart goes out to the commercial tenant in the current center. But this is unfortunately a blighted center. I drive this all the time. When I come to the city hall, that's the exit I take. And I explained it in the staff report. Our Community and Economic Development Department has conducted extensive outreach to the commercial tenant to assist them to relocation efforts. As also indicated by staff, all the tenants have been contacted, offered relocation assistance, and they have been provided with information on available commercial space in the city. Additionally, the proposed operator of the 7-Eleven as well as the proposed owner of the car wash are by all accounts good local business owner who will continue to be the assets for our community. Given the proposed condition of the approval considered in determining the convenient market and car wash uses would be compatible with adjacent uses, I will be supporting the staff recommendation to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission action approving the project. Councilmember Brandman, I thought, I asked if anybody wanted to speak. I understand.
I did not know you were going to close the
ahead.
I just need 30 seconds.
Got it. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize for following you. Closing. I just wanted to state that I actually was in contact after the vote and when this was agendized with my appointee to the Planning Commission, who went through quite a bit of research, soul searching, because I knew that this project was getting a lot of community input, and that she was investing a significant amount. She invests a significant amount of time in everything. I think she's probably going to go down. Hopefully, go down as one of the best planning commissioners ever served on our planning commission. And I'm in agreement with the decision that she reached. I thought it was very thoughtful. And I'll be supporting the project tonight as well.
Thank you. So there is a motion to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission. So if you're going to vote yes on it, you're going to deny that. So I'm going to be very clear with the council. With that, at this time, please vote.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Anaheim approving conditional use permit number 2019-06035, public convenience or necessity number 2019-00148, and administrative adjustment number 2020-00449, making certain findings in connection therewith. And the action of the resolution also includes a secret determination. Resolution of the City Council approving tentative track map number 2020-100 and making certain findings in connection therewith. Councilmember Diaz, if you can please cast your vote.
Can you cast your vote, please?
I'm confused, Mayor. Voting yes means what?
If you're going to vote yes, that means you're denying the appeal.
Denying the appeal and approving the project.
Yes.
The vote is 4 ayes, 3 nays. Nays by Mayor Pro Tem Faessel, Councilmember Moreno, Councilmember Valencia. Motion carries.
Thank you. At this time, is it for council comments for future agenda? At this time, I'm going to start on my right. I'm sorry, we have to finish our meeting at this time.
I just want to remind you that by order, by government, because you say you don't talk about politics, but we forced to be in our house almost 7 months. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
7 months. We cannot do anything for 7 months.
I understand, but let us fit.
Nobody understands, especially him.
Is
I know I understand
is-
commercial and everything, but we want the city to help us. Okay?
I understand. That item is finished. Let me start with Councilmember Moreno. Please go ahead.
How we can do something about it if we stay at home for 6 months?
Councilmember Moreno, please go ahead. Start that.
Paying electricity, paying water, paying gas.
Ma'am, we heard you. We heard you.
No, you don't. I have almost $20,000 in products.
Thank you. We heard you.
Sitting there because for the pandemic, it's just damaged.
Please, you
We
are.
call the governor.
Councilmember Moreno, please go ahead.
It's easier to recall council members than the governor. Mr. Mayor, and I think with Senora Rosalinda, thank you for coming out this evening. Communications I have are I do lament the decision that was just made. It was very clear to me that, and I will share data with the public, I was hoping this would be different. In the ensuing meetings for the public, I will be sharing, based on our lobbyist registry report, how much money is given to lobbyists in our city for projects of the ones we heard this evening, and how the votes tend to follow exactly the folks who gave money, who received money from those very lobbyists. the lobbyist this evening, which was a pertinent question, and maybe perhaps it was political, as commented by a council member, but the politics wasn't introduced by me, but by folks who pay thousands and thousands of dollars for political consultants. That's what we heard this evening. The developer contracted a political consultant, Mr. O'Neill, so that they can be guided on the politics of Anaheim. I didn't introduce that. That's not an attack. That's the developer who said that. And as a result, we have folks like Rosalinda here in front of us and 8 small business owners who don't have that kind of money who will always lose in that fight. Now, I want to remind us, colleagues, that there was a lot of concern about homelessness at 7-Eleven, but in the reports done at the county level, homelessness, 75% of homeless people in Orange County are a function of economic catastrophes. They lost their homes in the economies, they couldn't find jobs in the economies, or they were small business owners that we heard this evening who were not able to sustain their business for whatever reason, and in this case being displaced explicitly by actions of this government, Mr. Diaz. This government just took an action to support the displacement of 8 small business owners, 2 of which said they don't know where they're going to live if they can't sustain this business. So I do hope the developer keeps her word that she said to hundreds of people that she will make sure that these folks land on their feet and that you would support them until they can start walking again on their feet economically. And I hope that our city, because the government created this displacement or supported it, will support through its resources to support these small business owners. We have to be able to balance the game, Mr. Diaz. When government gets developers who pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in sum to influence the government's decisions, who protects the little guy, the little woman? Who protects them? And that's supposed to be us. We're supposed to be the arbiters of that. And if we don't want to because we think it's a better development, then we should at least put some resources to support the unintended, if they are unintended, consequences. So, Mr. Mayor, I hope that our staff, Mr. City Manager, that you will ask our community economic development team to work even more with these small business folks, to work with the developer to make sure that these folks can land on their feet. As I said, it is lamentable that a cloud continues to exist in some of our decision making, but that's what happens when our politics are infused with finances. So I will be sharing data with the public in the ensuing months, also with proposals of how we might be able to make these decisions much more transparent, and hopefully that our public can trust more and that our council can not have to attack itself on this. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. At this time, ma'am, I'm going to ask you, you're disrupting our meeting right now. Can I ask, would you please ask her to take our side, please? You're disrupting our meeting at this time. Would you please let us finish our meeting? Councilmember Diaz, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I rule my life through a set of principles. I live through communism, and nobody can buy my vote. I grew up in communism. Again, I still carry the scars of what policies like that bring to society and its destruction. And it's no one person, no any money that could buy my vote. No one whatsoever. Again, I believe in the principle of free market. This place was for sale. What do you think is going to happen to this small business? Doesn't matter what you bring there. McDonald's, Starbucks coffee, these most businesses were going to be displaced. Just like in the past, drive-in theaters, they were displaced. In the past, Sears was displaced, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's how the free market works. It's always moving and improving itself. Not the government, but the free market. Those are my principles. Nobody buys my vote. That's what I believe. I believe in that. I risk my life to do and exercise my vote the way I do it now.
Thank you, Councilmember Diaz. Councilmember Valencia.
I too would like to echo some of the remarks made by Councilmember Moreno regarding the disappointing outcome of tonight's public hearing. I am the son of immigrant parents who also invested in a small business to put food on the table, and it's difficult to see the outcome of decisions that are made by individuals and how they impact the lives of current Anaheim residents, current Anaheim business owners, and also the future generations of those Anaheim residents. I would like to ask the city manager to do everything within our power to help facilitate the conversation between agencies and finding support in the transition of these small businesses into whatever their next endeavor is. And let's hope that there is something after this for them.
Thank you, Councilmember Valencia. Mayor Pro Tem Faessel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In